Hi, everyone. We have an announcement.
So, guess what happens on August 5th?
Something big about a little thing?
The 30th anniversary of Penelope Spheris's The Little Rascals.
Oh my goodness. A
Can you believe
classic.
that? So,
But
I haven't
why
even...
are we so excited? Why are we so excited about
That's
this?
what I'm saying. You think that was big. I have an even bigger announcement than that.
What is it? Tell them.
I want to drag it out forever. So, there's this guy named Paul Gay, and he wrote The Little Rascals on the July 30th episode of Write Better Together. We will be interviewing the Paul Gay, the writer of The Little Rascals. Oh my gosh.
Oh my
I can't even
gosh.
believe it. It's just like everything it could possibly be in one episode.
So, stay tuned.
Nothing beats a buck and a duck. Welcome, everybody, to Write Better Together. I'm Jon Meyers. Hey, look, everybody, it's Emily Brooks.
Hello, Jon Meyers.
Hey, what are we talking about today?
Well, we had
Quite the list.
We have quite the list, but we also have quite the guest.
Oh.
Who was willing to answer some questions for us.
Oh.
We have Bob Saenz.
Wow.
Screenwriter extraordinaire, back on the podcast.
A real celebrity on our podcast.
No, no. He's never going to come back on if you keep calling him that. And we asked him about story logic, which is one of his big topics. Yes. And it's turned into a conversation about nonfiction as well. And so we have lots of things to talk about.
Biopics
and adapting true stories. Before that, we have a call to action response. I'm going to try to stump Jon Meyers with a new factoid.
Yay.
We're going to have a new call to action, and then we have the final act, this time hosted by Jon Meyers.
The final act.
How'd you get out of your bubble?
I went on my stupid walk.
I love that you hate walking, but you do it. You still do it.
I do it because it's good for me.
Yeah.
I'm very disappointed. So we're going to have an episode on disappointment. I should probably save it for that. But so it occurred to me halfway through the walk while I'm listening to Dana Carvey and David Spade podcast. I'm not out of my bubble. I took my bubble with me because I have right. So the idea is to get away from the computer, go out into the world, talk to people, network. I'm by myself walking with earbuds in, listening to a podcast. I could do that at home. So it's a sham. My walk is a sham. I'm not getting out of my bubble. So I took my earbuds out. Oh, now I'm out of the bubble. Now what do I do? Like I'm just walking. Are your cicadas out yet? It looks like they are,
yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, for
ours
sure.
are not out yet, and
wow.
There's no cicadas. Thank goodness, because that noise really bothers me.
And by the way, we're recording this early May, so when this comes out, cicadas
will be dead.
They'll hopefully, by then.
But we don't have any yet. And do you have mosquitoes?
Yeah.
We didn't have any mosquitoes last year, and then we haven't had any yet this year either, which is weird because normally there's a bunch in my neighborhood. Anyway, so I don't even have a cicada sighting for my walk. So here's what I saw on my walk outside of my bubble. Mm-hmm. I saw 2 car parts. One was a brake, like someone's brake pad fell off and they continued driving down the road without a brake. One was a part, I don't know what it was. I saw a diaper. Ooh. And this isn't a mile walk, so I don't want you to think that like I'm walking through a trash heap.
But did you write log lines about the trash that you found?
Yeah. And so this wasn't all like together. This is like walk a quarter of a mile and then, oh look. And I saw a pair of underwear. And
oh my word.
and this is in a neighborhood with sidewalks, right? A residential neighborhood. I did not find. I always say I'm going to find $60 on my walk. I did not find $60, but I
Man,
found a diaper, underwear, and 2 car parts.
should have
That's
written
it.
log lines.
I said that was it, but it's really leading to something. So on the Twitter, on the X, I've been doing a thing at midnight or 2 in the morning, where you tell someone you'll listen to their podcast and they'll listen to yours. I've been trying to use episodes from our podcast to answer questions. So, like, if someone has a relationship question, I'll give them the Carrie Drobin episode, and like, oh, make sure you're not dating a sociopath, and then I'll give them that episode. But this one guy, he had a challenge on his podcast that say hi to 10 strangers. And so I used my walk as an opportunity to say hi to 10 strangers. Now that is getting out of my bubble, right? And so I happened to cross 5 on this walk, 2 on bicycles, 3 also walking. They all had their underwear on. None of them were wearing diapers, so they were not related to my found objects. And 3 people. So he did it to 100 people, and I forget what his statistics were. But 3 people said hi back. One like looked at me like, "Why are you saying hi to me, you jerk?" Like, was really rude, and but I still smiled. And then and I didn't mean I was calling him a jerk. I meant he was looking at me like I was a jerk for saying hi to him. And then one was a girl, and she didn't get off her phone, so she just walked right by me while she was in her bubble on her phone. And she was having a cheerful conversation. And so I'll just leave it at that. What did you do outside of your bubble?
Nice. First of all, I think that's good. I go for walks often, and it's usually just like a hey, hello. But there have been like times where we've stopped and had a conversation. But don't try to stop and have a conversation with somebody who has binoculars. I'm just saying.
Because they are peeping toms.
Because you were gonna disturb the birds that they're looking at.
Oh.
So what you might do is go up to them and go, "What are you seeing?"
And they'll be like, shh.
They'll love that. That's actually the best time to meet people is when you're like, "Look, there's a snake over there," or "There's a yellow-rumped warbler." Yeah.
I thought you were a bird watcher. Now you're a snake watcher.
I tend to see snakes a lot. I actually was trying to decide which story to share, but you shared walking, and so John, my husband and I have friends who like we know that if we want to hang out with somebody last minute, they are the ones that we can contact. Partly because they don't have kids, but also they're just like our friend Hannah's very extroverted, so she'll always be up for it. And we were like, let's go for a walk. And then we got stuck in traffic at the place we're gonna go to. And then we decided to go to the place next to our friends. And so last minute, like on the way, we were like, do y'all want to meet us on this walk? And they actually said yes and met us 10 minutes later with their dog to go for this walk. And that was the first day that really the cicadas were bad. And so yeah, that's just an example of for me of being willing to ask people to join you to do something. Because John and I sometimes are bad about just like, we're going to go do this thing. But we were like, you know what? We haven't seen our friends for a while. Let's actually like let them join us and get out of our bubble.
You said you were stuck in traffic, not for your walk. So you were driving to your walk.
Yeah, we don't really have anywhere to walk here that doesn't have sidewalk. Like we don't have a sidewalk.
So that's cool that you have these go-to people. And then also the fact that you met them halfway, that actually comes up later in the episode of meeting someone halfway.
Nice.
And you didn't even know.
I did go on a walk a couple weeks ago with my sisters, and that's when I learned about their band, the kids, their band, but
Oh, yeah.
also just funny quote. I always have funny quotes for my nieces and nephews. My nephew looked at a tree, and he looks kind of grumpy, and he looks at it and goes, "That tree's not growing. I planted that years ago."
That's funny.
That's all. Also, my nieces and nephews have a cicada hospital.
I have bad news for them.
They
It's
also
not
have a
going to go
cicada.
well.
They also have a cicada graveyard.
Oh, well,
Marked
then
by the
that business
exoskeleton.
will be booming soon. The hospital, not so much. They better
Yeah.
get their billing in. They better get collections working on their billing
Yes.
soon.
Oh man, kids are so creative. I love it.
Yeah, which is why they need to do those drawings.
Oh yeah. Oh, we haven't talked to our listeners about that, but one day.
All right.
All right. We have a call to action response. Speaking of my family, we have a response from my sister Bethany Hale, who is a poet, and she says. So we asked, or when we had our Carrie Drobin episode, our interview, we talked a lot about like identifying your character's core problems or like that moment in their past that really made them who they are. She called them the watershed moment. And so we asked people to share the watershed moment for their characters. So my sister Bethany, she's working on a story. And she says, I'm working on a story right now about the importance of names, the naming of things. The watershed moment for my character is when her community gives her a different name and she no longer remembers who she really is.
That's the Barnabas name.
I was going to say, it's funny that she said that because we have another call to action about your Barnabas name, which is what is the name that your community would give you? And apparently in her story, the name that the community gave this character actually alters her identity where she forgets who she is. So
interesting.
Yeah, all characters need to have that watershed moment. If you really, really want to develop your characters more deeply, that is, what was it that made them who they are today? So I love that example.
I'm writing down to add to our future afterthought list how we name our characters.
Ooh, that's really good. I think I've mentioned before that Google probably thinks I'm like always having a baby.
Oh.
All right. I've like I keep forgetting what our sections are. We're on our main topic now, right? Main topic?
Yes. Big idea.
What did I forget?
Nothing.
Nothing? Okay. So, we're sharing the video with Bob first.
If we don't talk about a segment for 30 minutes, then we think it's too short.
Yeah. So how did we get here already? What are we doing?
We're watching Emily laugh. We talked to Bob, as Emily mentioned in the opening earlier, and Bob Saenz, celebrity screenwriter, and he had the conversation kind of morphed. Emily asked him about story logic, and it wound up in advice on how to write a biopic, and there's a couple topics in between.
Yeah. And so we're gonna share that that conversation with you, and then we're gonna come back, and we just had so much to talk about that we want to share some more thoughts.
Yeah, it's worthy of a whole episode. It didn't need to be, not that our afterthoughts aren't worthy of a whole episode, but it's longer than an afterthought.
Yeah. All right, here's Bob Saenz.
because there's a value in length. That's what my takeaway of what I just said. You just talk about nothing, but if it's long, it deserves its own episode.
Yeah.
Right.
So I had some leftover questions in my mind after hearing you at the festival. So while you were there and while you were specifically, this wasn't on our podcast, but you were talking about writing for Hallmark, and you talked about story logic, and you write about that a lot in your book, that's not the way that works. And so I was wondering if you could just introduce us to the idea of story logic, give us idea of what that means and how it's applied.
It means your story needs to be logical. Basically, it needs to make sense to the audience. When your characters do things out of character and it no longer makes sense, or they do something illogical based on who they are or what the story you're trying to tell is, you lose your audience. They will turn it off or turn it off. but when you have your characters do things completely out of character for convenience, it's about the worst thing you can do, because it's an insult to the people who are watching. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I've definitely experienced the rage of seeing a character do something out of character and just going like yelling at the TV, just like that. They would never do that. That was just to get the story moving. It's very frustrating.
It is very frustrating, but and your story, the story you're telling, has to make sense to the audience too. You can't just do things because it makes it easier for you to tell the story.
Yeah.
Okay. You have to. A lot of thought goes into writing being an actual storyteller, and writing a screen story or even a novel. You have to. The worst thing I read are the scripts that are a bunch of unrelated scenes that they think are cool, that they think with the same characters, that they think somehow is a story, and it's not. Producers, as much as people love them and hate them, and I love them mostly, they buy story. They don't buy anything else. That's what they buy. And if they're going to do anything from you, that's even if they don't keep you on as a writer, they're going to buy your story and have some other writer come in and improve on that story. It's the story, and I can't say it enough.
Yeah, a bunch of
I was at a film festival this week with a bunch of very interesting writers, and who have lots of films made, and we all sat on a panel, and all these questions kept coming in, and all of the writers, all of them said, if you have a scene in your film, in your script, and you can take it out and it doesn't change the story, then you need to get rid of it.
That's good.
So yeah, a bunch of stuff happening. That's not a story. So taking the answer that you just gave us, this answer will still stand up to the scenario I'm going to paint you. But what's the variant on it? How does it vary when you're dealing with? I thought you were going to say when writers write a biopic or write about themselves. That's what I thought you were going to say. And so they'll include things that aren't cinematic in their script because it was in this person's real life. How do you deal with that?
I tell people not to write about themselves. I tell people that when you tell a producer that your script is your personal story, that it's a biography of you, they're looking for an escape plan. 3 steps from a clean getaway. They don't want to hear it. If you want to write a story about your life, take parts of your life, fictionalize the rest, use stuff in it, and enjoy it for yourself and tell your friends, but never tell a producer. Exactly. They don't want to hear it. Unless you did something that was famous enough that an audience would care that it's your life story, no matter how interesting you think it is. If an audience says, "Oh, I knew that guy. He was in the newspaper. He rode a bicycle from Germany to Iraq. and over the ocean or whatever. I have no idea. and or did something amazing and spectacular, saved 400 penguins from a fiery death, in Uruguay. Those kinds of things.
Look how Emily's laughing at the death of 400 penguins.
Well, there were also cannibals involved.
It was the fact that they were in Uruguay.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
So well, they're on vacation, but it's a great vacation spot. They pay attention if it's somebody well known or somebody who's infamous, who's had a story in the newspapers, or in there was a documentary written about him or something. But just coming off the street saying, "This is my life story, and I've had such an interesting life that I think it would be a good movie people would want to see." It's just not.
So that's the perfect tie-in to my next question. So when you're writing about someone else's true story in a biopic, so I finally got around 3 years to watch Queen Pins about, and Kristen Bell is the woman, and it's a heist, but they stole coupons and sold them online.
Yeah,
and it's a true story, and there were elements in it that were like, so first of all, I'll confess I liked it, and but there were elements of it where you could literally see the script. Not that it was on the nose, but you could tell that this one scene here didn't need to be in the story, but it was because it was in the real life story. But it wasn't in the movie.
That just is a product of whoever made the movie. If the people who were about put the money up, or they had somehow had script approval, which is somewhere among the most impossible things in the world. You never know, or maybe it was just running too short and they decided to add the scene in. But when I've written one true story biography, and I told the guy, I'm going to make stuff up. I'm going to combine characters. I'm going to change the timeline.
Yeah.
And no one will know. And it's still your life, and it's still the real things that happened. It's just kind of embellished, because if I told it the way it really happened, people would turn it off even though it's fascinating. People would go, where's the meat? Yeah. Where's the conflict? Where's the this? Where's the that? And you have to make it cinematic. You have to make it so that a moviegoer realizes that this is maybe somebody's life, but it's also a movie.
I think a lot of this applies to nonfiction, not like nonfiction books as well. I was just at a conference where there was a bunch of agents reading people's submissions, and they got a nonfiction one, and what they said was, this, to sell this, it would be better if you fictionalized it. They were like, if you're going to write nonfiction, you have to have a huge platform, first of all. You have to have people who care about that. And then it also, most of the time, needs to be prescriptive in order for people to care. So it has to be, you're not just sharing about your life, you're also teaching something, or you're inspiring people in some way.
There has to be a lesson to be learned from it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I had a good friend is writing this fantastic memoir, and an agent basically said that she was like, you need to change your age, first of all. They were like, make the character younger, and then change all these other things. And he's like, well, I don't want to do that. So I think that, write the thing that you're passionate about, but know that there are going to be barriers to getting reader interest and getting publishers' interest as well.
Publishers, again, are just like producers. They're not going to take a book by somebody who didn't do, who the public doesn't know, and say, here's my biography. I did all these incredible things in my life, and people are going to want to read about me when they've never heard of me. It isn't going to happen. Nobody's going to say, "Ooh, look, here's a story about," and I remember this happening, or I saw this, or when it's about nobody you know, how are you going to look at it and read it and think, do I want to read this?
Right.
And when there are,
it's hard enough to get a publisher as it is.
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine say that if you want to ride the crest of maximum rejection, try and get a book to a traditional publisher.
And getting back to the nonfiction books, here's Bob's nonfiction book. That's not the way it works.
Yes.
When there's personal stories in here, but they're pertinent to the lesson that you're teaching in that chapter. And so they're illustrations of whatever the point of that, the big idea.
Well, and and part of the point of the book is there's a lot of screenwriting books written by people who have never done it. And I've got 30 years worth of experience that I can say, look, I was at a production meeting for a movie that was getting ready to go in production, or I was at a production meeting while a movie was in production, or I was at a meeting where we were developing a script that was going to go into production. And I can talk about what happened at those meetings and what it was all about, versus somebody who has never had a movie made writing a screenwriting book saying, here's what you need to do in a meeting like that. So my 30 years of experience and all the movies that I've written that have been produced, that believe it or not, a lot of people have seen, makes a difference in whether people are going to look at that book and say, okay, now I want to read this because he's been there and done that.
And it's prescriptive again. You're using those stories to teach somebody. And I think when people are going to nonfiction, that's what they want. They go to fiction for a story, but for nonfiction, they're going, what can I get out of this? What can I learn?
Or if it's somebody really famous that
it's
you
that
just
curiosity.
want to learn about their life, it's a curiosity thing. I read a lot of biographies, but they're never about people I don't know.
Right.
Good point.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Have a fun podcast.
Bye.
Thank you for having me back. Anytime you call me, I will come back and answer more questions.
We'll remember that.
Because I love
Very
you
good.
both.
All right.
Bye.
And we're back.
Wow, that was great.
It was great. I love talking to Bob.
Bob's always great.
He's so wise. But we still had some more thoughts on this conversation. Do you want to start?
Well, you talk about nonfiction first.
Sure.
Because that's the beginning of the conversation.
Sure. So one of the things that kept coming to mind to me after the conversation was the difference between, I mean, and this kind of comes up in all of our conversations because we have a screenwriter, Jon Meyers, and then me, and I write a lot of memoir. And so the comparison between screenwriting and non-screenwriting. So I think what Bob was talking about with pitching nonfiction stories, it's going to be difficult if you don't have that platform. And it's the same thing with writing nonfiction memoir or biopic, that if people don't know who you are, it's going to be a hard sell. But I do have some examples with me.
Wow.
So first of all, you are going to obviously have memoirs, biopics of people that you do know about. Like, you said last time, like, you have a bunch of books on your bookshelf.
There's some over there, but there's a bunch right here that if you zoom in, you can see Charles Grodin and Martin Short.
But some people are like known for writing personal essays. So the first one I have is Annie Dillard. So Annie Dillard is like known for writing personal essays. And then, but the thing is about them is that a lot of them are really inspiring to people, and it's philosophical. And so it's not just about her. And I think that that's kind of what we were getting at, is that sharing your story, often what you're doing is you're sharing more than just your story. You're sharing something that the reader finds value in. Another example, more recent, is Margaret Rinkle, who wrote Light Migrations. And this was kind of like, I don't think it was supposed to, like, it wasn't expected to become as popular as it did. And it's like these short, and I've got this up for the YouTube viewers, but it's this beautiful book of like, it's just got these really short little segments. It has poetry, and it's beautiful, and it's actually not very prescriptive. It's not like, here's what you learn from this. It's called Late Migrations: A Natural History of Love and Loss, and it the inside thing, it's, what is that called? The jacket says it's a captivating portrait of a family and of the cycles of joy and grief that inscribe human lives within the natural world. In many ways, it's more like a poetry chapbook, where you're reading it for that beauty and for those insights that sometimes a writer can just say the right things in the right way, in a way that makes you think about things differently. So there's value in that. I also have Adorning the Dark by Andrew Peterson. He's one person who was like already famous before he wrote this, but this is memoir and essay combined. That's kind of what I do. In fact, I read this book, Adorning the Dark, after I wrote The Redeemed Imagination, and was like, why is Andrew Peterson not my best friend? Because there's so many similarities. I've seen him before, and I just kind of was like, I didn't actually say hi. I needed to go up to him. But anyways, this is Thoughts on Community Calling and the Mystery of Making. And again, a lot of it's memoir, but some of it's essay and just thoughts. And so you have all different kinds of these books, people who are famous or people who are not famous, that people are finding value in, again, because of that insight, because of the beauty of them, and not just for the story, if that makes sense.
Do you think, I had not planned on asking this question and during this topic, do you think they wrote those for themselves or for us, for the audience?
I think they wrote them for the audience.
I do too. I agree. That conversation that we talked about in a previous episode, I just pulled that up. And I'm not going to name any of these people because I don't have permission to name them, but they're all screenwriters. A good writer will always have the audience in mind. Any place you write about the audience without the audience in mind is just a diary. And then there are 57 people that argued with him. And,
oh, wow.
And who said things like, I write just to please one person, myself. A good writer writes what they want to see, and they don't necessarily write for the audience. And as it goes on and on and on of people blasting this guy. Here's another one. Yeah. I don't agree with that at all. The underlying assumption is that you even have an audience. What the? What the heck? Vonnegut, though. Vonnegut said something like, oh, how did he say it? He writes for one person, and for writing for more than one person is like making love with the window open, and all that's going to do is cause your story to get pneumonia.
Oh, wow.
And so
that sounds like something he would say.
Yeah, we share the same birthday. And so I normally agree with him, but I don't agree with that. Because I agree with that first guy. It would be a diary.
Yeah.
And that's not why any of those people wrote those books.
Right. And I think that it can be, this is a really tough conversation or tough topic, and we've talked about it at length, but in the past, but surely they're also writing it, like they're writing what they want to write and they're writing what they want to read, but they're also thinking about what their audience is going to be able to take away from it. Like if Annie Dillard was just writing a diary, I'm sure her diary is brilliant. But she's very intentional.
Your blog, little did she know, is a perfect example. You're working through some struggle, right? It's very personal, but it's for us. It's
Yeah, I'm very intentional about what is like I don't write a diary. Like my blog is not a diary. My book, The Redeemed Imagination, has some memoirish stuff in it, but I try to point it to the broader topic and the broader like thing that I'm trying to say. Um, so it doesn't always have to be 100% prescriptive, like 7 ways to be a better person or something. But the audience is going to be looking for what are they going to take away from it.
I agree.
Now, as far as publishing, like I do think it is hard. It's really hard to write nonfiction if you don't have an existing platform. So I would be working on that. If I were, I mean, I am like that's what partly what I'm doing with my blog is that. But I also think you don't always have to fictionalize it. I think that's an option. If you have a story that you want to share and you really want it to be published and you don't have that platform, I think fictionalizing it is a valid option. But that may not be what you want to do, and I think you should write the thing that you want to write. What do you think about that?
I'm processing that. I mean, you should always write what you want to write,
Yeah.
but you find, like, let's say you're writing on assignment and it's something you would have never, you're writing Airbud 21 and it's something you would have never thought of, but someone's
Yeah.
giving you a nice paycheck to write that.
Yeah.
You will still find a way to tell your story
Absolutely.
through Airbud's story.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the farmer and the bell,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Which Bob Saenz didn't talk about this during our interview, but he talked about it at the film festival when we watched Farmer and the Bell, how it was loosely inspired by these people's lives, but he wrote it and he got to put, some of the things in there that he wanted to put in there.
Yeah, he combined, and then he cleaned up the real life story where he combined these two characters, and
Yeah.
so the pastor didn't need to be its own separate character,
Right.
and was more effective if the pastor was the leading man or whatever.
And that was him thinking about the audience as well, that sometimes you have permission even in memoir to change some things.
So we talked about that in writing class last night, that there is no, unless you're recording it and writing it down as a transcript, no one remembers any conversation.
Yeah.
Even in a true like memoir, whether then you're trying to stay to the original details, as soon as it's the next day, no one remembers exactly every detail the same. And so if they said can't and you wrote cannot, you don't change the point of the sentence or the takeaway of the message, but you change what that guy said.
For years, my dad has been telling a story about his childhood, and then we were sharing it one day, and my grandma went, "That wasn't him. That was his brother." And my dad was like, "Yeah, but you wouldn't care about a story about him."
Uh-oh.
So he told the story as if it was himself, just because it's a better illustration when he's teaching.
Interesting.
You can take that however you want.
I'm not going to comment any further. This deals with your family. The things that connect. So Bob made a statement that don't write your life story unless you've done something big, right? Like Oppenheimer. We're not going to write about Oppenheimer's first day in kindergarten, right?
Right.
We're going to write about him inventing the bomb. And so many people would think, like, these 57 people arguing with this guy, they think that talking about walking out to the mailbox is fascinating and that's their art.
Yeah.
And and that's not first of all, it's not a story, but
Yeah.
second of all, these aren't people saying I'm going to put it in my diary. These are like, the world needs to know about the struggle I had at McDonald's this morning. No, they don't. Uh, However, you can make a compelling small moment an entire story. And so you do that in your blog every day. Jammin', that's what I was turning around.
Yes.
Jammin' does that in a paper orchestra. And when I talked about, and I'm going to use an example, when you said you met your friends halfway, about meeting halfway, that's the point I'm going to use to illustrate this. Is one of these stories in here. It's a true story, but it's a legitimate story with a hero, an obstacle, a goal, and an obstacle. And so he he one of his coworkers finds out that he's taking dancing lessons, and he's been taking dancing lessons for a while, and so he's pretty good at it at this point. And she's a little bit older, but she's like a real professional, and he's new in Hollywood. He's in his young 20s, she's in her late 30s, and she's like, "Oh, you're in dance. Oh, can I go?" And he's like, "Sure." And so they go. It turns into a date, and in LA everyone drives, and so they only live a mile apart, but he's, instead of walking, meeting her halfway like you did in your thing, he circles and he goes to pick her up, and the circle gets bigger and bigger and bigger because he's not finding a parking spot, right? And he ends up about halfway between where he lives and where she lives, and he walks from there, right? And so they go on their date, one thing leads to another, he spends the night, and then he realizes that he's still a boy. Like, he's going back to his apartment where he doesn't have real bookshelves. His books are on like cinder blocks and boards, and he has milk crates for furniture, and he has a uh, scuzzy apartment, and with a futon, where she has a beautiful bedroom and real bookshelves and artwork on the wall, and that she's a grown-up. And so he realizes, as he's walking back to his car that's halfway between his home, his skanky home, and her beautiful home, that he's halfway between becoming a man, right? So it's a story about becoming a man, and that he's halfway there. And so that small moment of parking halfway between the two represents the overall arching theme of he's not where she's an adult, right? And he's still a kid, and but he's halfway there. And we all have those small moments, and that's a complete story. And if you read it or listen to the audiobook, it's beautiful. I talked about it in a previous episode where Larry David talks about when we're packing for a trip, it doesn't matter what our demographic is. We all know what that hour is, or if you're me, 6 hours packing for a trip and making sure you have everything. It's a commonality that we all share, and is something that people can relate to, but not just relate to, oh, I'm familiar with it. They know the struggle, they know the goal and the obstacle. It's something that we've all done.
Yeah, and I think that, so now I'm thinking about whenever we share our stories where we got out of the bubble, there's a reason for that.
Yep.
We're not just randomly, I mean, sometimes I'm just like, oh yeah, I did this thing, and it's not really a story. But even today, when I talked about going for the walk, I stopped and was like, what did I get out of this? I got that I can invite people to do things alongside me. So we try to like use that as a teaching moment or as a revelation moment. And I think that's what Jamin is doing, and that's what Annie Dillard is doing, and Margaret Rankle is doing. So I have a class where my students have to write personal essays, and I try so hard to get them to do what you just said, but they always start their essays with, I was born in Texas in 1965 to my parents and in this small little house in the, like, and it always tells their whole life story. And I'm like, take that out. I don't need to know your whole life story. Tell me a story from your life, because that's going to be far more compelling. So it's again kind of thinking about the audience, and treating it like a story, not like a diary.
So I do the same thing. The first thing they write in a freshman writes is a personal, but I'm like, I leave it open, but it has to be a real life time where you were crushed by a crowd, something like that, right?
That's good.
Where
I like
and
specificity.
that's in my memory from what we talked about
Mm-hmm.
in previous episode, but that it but I've done that one, or a time where you were in a contest or a beauty pageant or some sort of competition. It wasn't sports or
Yeah.
whatever, where it gives them. It's Rigby's right a lot about a little, right? It's this
Mm-hmm.
little moment. And when we were talking about Carrie Drobin's watershed moment,
Yep.
I have in 300, where 300 they have to write within their major. And in the past, I've had my students, they have to write about their pivot point of where they were washing dishes at Applebee's, where they were the moment they decided they were going to be a marketing major, or they were going to be,
Oh,
they
that's good.
like, I don't want to know why. I don't want to know your parents pressured you into it. I want you to write about the filthy fork and spoons you're washing as a dishwasher at Applebee's. The very moment, the pivot point when you had that. And they're out of 100 students, 90 of them get it, right?
Yeah.
There'll be 10 of them that do what you just said, but
They do an overview. It's like, here's just a description of my life or what happened, instead of telling a story and getting into those details.
yep. I have one more thing I want to say about biopic. Do you have something else to say
No,
before
I
that?
was gonna hand it over to the screenwriter.
So I haven't seen anyone argue this online, and so I used Oppenheimer for an example, that you couldn't tell a compelling story about his first day in kindergarten. You could, if one of those packing your
Yeah,
suitcase moments happened, right? You could.
right.
I don't know that would be cinematic enough, and it's certainly if you're a newbie screenwriter, you're not going to write that about your first day at work at the paper company or whatever, right? And
Mm-hmm.
because you're not Oppenheimer. However, I contend that Barbie, who's a fictional character, believe it, based on a real character, I contend the movie Barbie is a biopic, and so it's interesting that it came out on the same day as Oppenheimer, because two biopics came out, and and it's written like a biopic. It's the journey that she goes on is a a biopic. Um, there are all the elements of a biopic. They're all present, and there's a big history of people who tried to write that film and didn't get it right.
Mm.
And I've never seen Greta and Noah say, "Well, yeah, we just made a biopic." They said, and I mean, no one's going to argue with their $1 billion success. They said we wanted to get these points across in an entertaining way and tell an entertaining story, which they did. But the format's a biopic.
And that is also true of Little Women.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
Which
it is absolutely true. Yeah, Little
I
Women,
also think
both
Greta's
for Louisa May Alcott, right? And for Greta.
I think Greta's version is the best version. I've seen all 5 versions,
It's
and I
beautiful.
think it's the best.
Yeah, it's great. I love that, and I think pretty much whenever you write something, you're putting yourself into it in some way. The last thing I'll say is that you were talking about Oppenheimer and where do you start the story? You start the story when something changes, when something significant changes. And so is it, being asked to build an atomic bomb? Probably not. But like for Michael Jamin in that story, for instance, it was the date, right? And so what is that like trigger thing, the thing that triggers those thoughts and emotions?
So many new screenwriters start the story with, they get up, they make coffee, there's a close-up on
Yeah.
on the digital clock. There's one movie that does that right. Do you know what that is?
Ooh, no.
Also a dog movie, but not a talking dog movie. The book's over there. I would hold it up because Scott Meyers would love that I held it up. Scott Meyers wrote the definitive book on character, and it's almost like a textbook. And but he wrote Canine with Jim Belushi and the dog. But it starts, so it's a buddy comedy, except the dog is the buddy. But it
No.
starts like that, where the alarm goes off and the guy hits snooze or whatever. But then it's the dog's paw that goes over. So it is a change, like what you said, right?
Yeah.
And because he's in bed with his dog, and because that's his best friend. And so it's a scene that we've seen a million times in a bad way. Here was a good novel use of it.
And my friend, so I mentioned my friend in the interview and how he's writing a memoir about his experiences, it's incredible. I've only read the first chapter. He starts, because it's a travel story. He doesn't start with him going, I think I might want to go travel. Like he starts like when he's there, and then he kind of backs up and tells us like how he got there, because it's the story starts like when he's there. It's that in media res. I've never known how to say that. In media
Res is how I say it.
In media res.
But it's probably Ray. It's probably in media Ray.
Oh yeah, that might be it. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
In the middle of things, in the midst of
Yes.
things.
Hey, Jon Meyers.
Yes. Hey.
Do you know? Okay,
Yes, I
so
know.
Several weeks ago, we put out an episode, like from when this releases, it's going to be a while ago, but we did an afterthought on our villain origin story.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
Do you know the villain origin story?
Of who the first villain was?
No, but where the word came from.
No, I don't. Thank goodness there's no prize.
I bet you could maybe think of where it came from if you think about
Julius Caesar.
No.
Et tu, Brute.
Villa.
What?
Like,
I don't know what you're saying.
What does it sound like? Villa.
A Villanova?
No. Okay. So the origin of the word villain is actually, it means inhabitant of a villa. In other words, it basically means villager.
So does vilified mean the same thing? I mean, does it have the same origin?
That's actually a great question. Maybe you stumped me, but
I thought you were going to say that was the origin, was from vilified. Okay, continue.
So, but the idea, the speculation from the Merriam-Webster website is that it was kind of meant to be like, oh, those villagers, those people who are uncouth, those people who are unpolished, maybe even a scoundrel. That it was a very mild kind of insult. Like it was, you're just a villager, but there was these upper class people who were like, oh, those poor villagers. So
it was kind a polite of like insult.
It was like a classist thing. And then somehow that turned into villainizing the villagers, literally. But they actually, like, that's where the speculation ends. They don't really know how we went from classist criticism of the villagers to full-on villain that we know of today?
I don't know that I learned anything. No, I did. I learned the village connection.
Yeah, there you go.
I learned something every week.
There you go. And even if you didn't, maybe the listeners did.
No, I learned the village connection, and that it's may or may not be related to vilified.
Yeah.
All right. I have a call to action. Remember 10 years ago when I told that story about going on my walk and I said hi to 5 people? I want you to get out of your bubble, say hi to 10 people. So do it 10 times and then report back to us how many positives. Sometimes you'll just get a smile, but I consider that positive.
I should have shared that I got stuck in a grocery store during a storm and had some great conversations with the people I was stuck with. So get stuck in a grocery store.
Oh, I was in a grocery store. This is short. I was in a grocery store and they tried to force us into the freezer because a tornado was coming.
Oh my
And
word.
I was like, no, this is before the pandemic. And I'm like, I'm not getting in a freezer with a bunch of germy strangers.
Oh.
and they're like, no, you have to. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And so I'm headed towards the front door. And I probably walked by 7 employees on the way to the front door. You need to get in the freezer. You need to get in the freezer. And I'm like, no, I'm going out the front door. And the managers at the front door, they're not going to let you out. I'm like, they're letting me out. And I got all the way to the front door. Lo and behold, the manager did not want to let me out. And I said, you're letting me out. And I went out and I sat in the parking lot and I watched big hard rain come. And then when they reopened, I went back in and finished my shopping. But there was probably 40 people that were cramming into the freezer.
Oh,
you're crazy.
man.
I'm not getting in there. All right.
That's why you check the weather. So
Notice I didn't name the store.
if you all want more stories like that, then make sure to
Who doesn't?
subscribe to the podcast so that you know when new episodes come out. We've got lots of good ones coming.
It had a hero, a goal, and an obstacle.
It did.
I had to get out the front door.
You did. Also, you can share your call to action responses, even old ones, on our website in our show notes under each podcast episode. So that's at writebettertogether.com/podcast. That's where you can find our show notes. You can also respond on our Facebook page, Write Better Together Now, or you can email us at writebettertogethernow@gmail.com.
Good job. All right, get ready. Emily.
I'm ready.
It's time for the final act.
I'm ready.
Today's final act is called Is This Title Really on Jon Meyers' Bookshelf?
Ooh. Okay.
And you will be playing for this potato. It's a potato. It's a brand new potato. There are no flaws or defects in it. A potato can be used if you're hungry. You can eat the potato. If you are cold, you can warm up the potato and put it in your pocket, and it can be a pocket warmer. If this were a week ago and you were going to the Met Gala, you could take the potato to a date with you, and that could be your date to the Met Gala.
So we actually used a potato as a loser gift for a gaming tournament once. So but that was a moldy potato.
Just like you killed Baggy, you're insulting.
That one's not moldy though. It looks delicious.
Person. All right. Ready?
I'm ready.
I'm going to share my screen now. You will see 3 books. One of them, or all 3 of them, or 2 of them might really be on the, well, at least one is, but it could be all 3 of them.
So it's multiple choice, but multiple answer.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, here we go. There are 3 books. One may be on the shelf. All 3 may be on the shelf.
Okay.
And the first one is Animals That Owe Me Money. North American Mammals by Ed Dodd.
Ready? Love it.
Now, don't answer till the end. Number 2, Animal Arc, But I Don't Want an Instagram. Why did she run away? Here, I see if I can zoom in on it.
I'm
Look.
confused by this book. It's just a picture of a sad-looking dog, but the story is I don't want an Instagram.
The dog doesn't want an Instagram. It's a storybook. That's why she ran away. And finally, what's the last one? Mike Nelson's Death Rat.
Oh my word.
So,
like a rat kaiju.
I don't know what kaiju is. Is this
Kaiju.
Hey Jon Meyers again? All right. Death Rat. I don't want an Instagram. Animals that owe me money. They're all animal related.
They are all animal related, and they are amazing.
All right. While you're thinking, I'm going to unshare the screen.
Okay.
So this part will get cut out. Now we're back into the craziness. Stop sharing.
What if I get it partially? Like, what if I get one right and the other one wrong? Do I get half a potato?
Oh, that's a good. So that's a great question. I don't have a knife to cut the potato, but
it'll be turned into fries, and I'll get a segment of fries.
Animals who owe me money.
Okay.
But I don't want an Instagram. Death Rat.
They're all so good. I'm gonna guess that you own Animals That Owe Me Money and Death Rat, but that you don't own But I Don't Want an Instagram.
Just because that's the one that confuses you.
It does confuse me. I can imagine you buying the other ones just because of the covers. Like, they're just good titles. And the other one, like, it is really funny too. But I don't know if you collect weird books.
So I do collect weird books. I actually had one for a prize, but you used a book for a prize, so I had to go get a potato. Used a book for a prize in a previous episode.
You had like the Abraham Lincoln's joke book, and like, okay, so
I have an even funnier
I'll
book
stick
for
to those answers, but I don't really have an explanation why. It's just that's my first instinct.
So you're guessing 2 out of 3.
Yeah.
The first and the third.
Yeah.
The answer is tell the people what I'm doing.
He's looking at his bookshelf. Are we going to put these on the Jon Meyers bookshelf in our bookshop?
Well, there's only one, and it's Mike Nelson's Death Rat. Do you know who Mike Nelson is?
No.
So the first 2 people were fake. They were fake books.
What?
And Mike Nelson he was one of the writers from the original Mystery Science Theater 3000. And then
of course I know who Mike Nelson is.
He was the second.
My goodness.
He was the second host of it. And,
yes, he's a great host. I love.
And he also has a memoir. Look at that.
Look at that. Wow. So, yeah, I never thought of him as an author, so I blanked on that. But of course, we watch so much Mystery Science Theater here; it's insane.
There you go.
There you go. So wait, so the other ones were fake?
Yeah, the first 2 were fake.
That explains so much. There you go. Well, listeners and Bob Saenz, we couldn't have. And potato. We couldn't have done it.
Without you.